Hello, we are halfway through The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde in this beautiful gilded book. Do you remember how old this story is? Do you remember? It was published in 1888, which makes it 133 years old. So if you haven't heard already, you need to hear part one, and I'm going to now read part two, the final part of The Happy Prince. So the swallow has already delivered the ruby, he's delivered the sapphire, and the moon has come up and he's flown back to the Happy Prince. "I come to bid you goodbye," he cried.
"Swallow, swallow."
Do you remember? "Little swallow," that's what he always says.
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me one night longer?"
"It is winter," answered the swallow, "and the chill snow will soon be here. In Egypt the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. My companions are building a nest in the temple of Baalbec, and the pink and white doves are watching them and cooing to each other. Oh, dear prince, I must leave you, but I will never forget you, and next spring I will bring you back 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away. The ruby shall be redder than a red rose, and the sapphire shall be as blue as the great sea."
"In the square below," said the Happy Prince, "there stands a little match girl."
Oh, I better tell you, do you know what a match girl is? Well, in Victorian times, first of all, children worked. So this is a little girl, not going to school, but selling things on the street. And what is she selling? Matches. Everyone needed matches. Very few people had lighters, and people didn't have electricity at homes to heat them. So they'd have a wood fire at home, and they needed constant supply of matches to light their fires and their stoves. So that's what she's doing. There's a little match girl in the street below.
"She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled."
Yes, you can't light a match when it's wet, can you?
"Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her. Then her father will not beat her."
"I will stay with you 1 night longer," said the swallow, "but I cannot pluck out your eye. You'd be quite blind then."
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "do as I command you."
So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. "Oh, what a lovely bit of glass!" cried the little girl, and ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince. "You are blind now," he said, "so I will stay with you always."
"No, little swallow," said the poor prince, "you must go away to Egypt."
"I will stay with you always," said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder, here he is, and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands. He told him of the red ibises who stand in long rows on the banks of the Nile. Oh, an ibis is a kind of bird, I think. Oh, I better look that up, actually. And they catch goldfish in their beaks. Yes, they are. And of the Sphinx, who is as old as the world himself, and lives in the desert and knows everything. Of the merchants who walk slowly by the side of their camels and carry amber beads in their hands. Of the king of the mountains and of the moon, who is as black as ebony and worships a large crystal, of the great green snake that sleeps in a palm tree and has 20 priests to feed it with honey cakes. So there's a snake in a tree who's fed by priests. Crazy stories. And of the pygmies who sail over a big lake on large flat leaves and are always at war with the butterflies.
Dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me of marvellous things, but more marvellous than anything is the suffering of men and of women. There is no mystery so great as misery. Fly over the city, my little swallow, and tell me what you see there.
So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates. He flew into dark lanes and saw the white faces of starving children looking out listlessly on the black streets. Under the arch of a bridge, 2 little boys were lying in one another's arms to try and keep themselves warm. How hungry they are! Oh, no, sorry, that's not the swallow's voice. This is the children's voice. How hungry we are, they said.
You must not lie here,
shouted the watchman, and then they wandered out into the rain. So they're not even allowed the protection of the bridge. The watchman sends them out. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen.
I am covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to my poor. The living always think gold can make them happy.
Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off until the prince looked quite dull and grey. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. We will have bread now, they cried. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. They were so bright and glistening. Long icicles like crystal daggers hung down from the eaves of the houses, and everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. He picked up crumbs from outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking, and he tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. Goodbye, dear prince, oh, he murmured. Will you let me kiss your hand?
I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow, said the prince. You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you.
It is not Egypt that I am going, said the swallow. I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not? And he kissed the happy prince on the lips, and he fell down dead at his feet. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below in company with the town
councillors. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. Dear me, how shabby the Happy Prince looks, he said. Oh, yes, how shabby indeed, yes, how shabby indeed, cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. The ruby has fallen out of his sword. His eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer, said the mayor. In fact, he is little better than a beggar. Oh, yes, little better than a beggar, little better than a beggar, said the town councillors. And here is actually a dead bird at his feet, continued the mayor. We really must issue a proclamation that birds are not allowed to die here. And the town clerk made a note of the suggestion. So they pulled down the statue of the Happy Prince. He is no longer beautiful, and he is no longer beautiful, and he is no longer useful, said the art professor at the university. And then they melted the statue in a furnace, and the mayor held a meeting of the corporation to decide what was to be done with the metal. Oh, we must have another statue, of course, he said, and it shall be a statue of myself. Oh, of myself, yes, of myself, said each of the town councillors, and then they quarrelled. When I last heard of them, they were quarrelling still. Oh, what a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. Bring me the two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. You have chosen right, said God. For in my garden of paradise, this little bird shall sing for evermore, and in my city of gold, the Happy Prince shall praise me. And that is the end. Wow. Were you expecting that? God appears at the end of the story and is the only one to recognize the value of both the bird and the Happy Prince. It's quite a sad story. It always gets to me when the little bird dies and he knows he's going to die and he tells the prince, kind of breaks my heart too. So what do you think the message or the moral of this story is? Do you think that the mayor and the councillors and the people in charge of the city come across well in this story? Do you think Oscar Wilde respects them and thinks they're doing a good job? No, I don't think so either. It's funny, this is written 132 years ago, as we have said, but many of the problems are still the same. The difference between rich people and poor people and how we share the goods of our society and our concern that we have for those who are poor and ill and needy. I think they're still concerns we have. One of the things to mention is, have any of you studied kind of Victorians in school yet? So when this story was written in 1888, children were still at that time working. They had just changed the law and said that children from the age of 5 to 10 should go to school. But before that,
children were sent to work in factories and houses and cleaning places from the age of, say, 5. No school for them. And so when Oscar Wilde wrote this story, there were a lot of problems for poor families and children, but they had just started to be allowed to go to school. But school ended when you were 10, and then you went out into the world of work. So that's kind of like year 5. Go and get a job. It was a hard time. And what do you think Oscar Wilde wants us to learn? What do you think he wants us to do? How do you think he wants us to behave to each other? I'd love to know what you think. It's a shame we don't have comments for the YouTube videos, but maybe you could tell your teachers, maybe you could write something. I'd be very interested to know. There are other tales in this book that are beautiful. They're all written a bit like fairy tales. They have a magical quality, a timeless quality. You know how the prince says every time, you know, swallow, swallow, little swallow. There's those kind of repeating refrains. They're lyrically written. So maybe read some of the other stories in this book. But now we've read this, if you're doing the reading roadmap, you can tick this off of the classic book list. I hope you're all well, and I'll have another story for you soon. Bye.